Good morning, everyone. I have spent over 30 years talking to grieving people. My kids say to me, "Mum, get a life." And in that time, I guess one of the most common things I've heard people say to me when they know what I do for a crush, they go, "Oh gosh, I never know what to say." So I wrote this book called Stuck for Words, and it took me, several years to write Stuck for Words, thank you. And today you're going to get my several years in 45 minutes, so hold on to your seats. Sometimes I think when we talk to someone who has a loss in their life, we kind of trot out what we call in grief terms, grief cliches. And things just almost roll off our tongue. Words like, "I know how you feel, you have to be positive, be brave, you're strong. Look, it was God's will, these things are meant to happen, every cloud has a silver lining," and so forth. And we often think by offering these words, we're encouraging, we're keeping people positive, we're helping them to stay sort of up rather than flat and down and depressed and low and in the dumps and all that kind of thing. However, empathy does not sound like that. And I often say for people, empathy is a little bit like this. It puts my head in a spin if I don't know what to say and I don't know which road to take. Do I take the road to try and cheer you up? Do I take the road to keep you positive? Do I take the road that tells you about somebody else, who's worse off than you? Do I take the road of telling my own story, so that you sort of know you're not alone? And often I think this whole which road will I take keeps people almost focused more on themselves and their own conversation in their head rather than on the person they're trying to help, the person they're trying to talk to and the conversation at hand. And so today I'm actually going to begin with a little conversation and you're going to do a little bit of work. Rob didn't say in the intro, but I used to be a high school teacher before I went into funerals. And people sometimes say to me in audience, "Your teaching comes out." So we're going to have a little look. We're going to meet, I might just whiz back, I'll tell you a little story. We're going to meet Michelle. And Michelle was Shoki the cat's owner. She was also my neighbour. And Shoki died aged 18. Now, I'll be honest, I didn't even know cats could get to 18. But anyway, I decided to write a book on pets and grief. And interestingly, one of my friends at the time said to me, "You writing any stuff at the moment?" And I said, "Well, actually, I'm writing something on the loss of a pet and grief." And this friend of mine said, "Yeah, but that's not real grief, is it?" And I thought, you only have to see some of the pet owners I met, who I interviewed and who are in my book, to know that, that is definitely real grief. So we're going to meet Michelle. She's telling us here about her last 24 hours with Shoki the cat. And you're going to imagine that she's telling you this story about how she spent that last day with Shoki at home. And then you're going to respond empathetically. But what I've done is I've made up the responses. I've got 7 of them. And I'll give you a minute or so to look at them. You can talk to the person beside you and go, "Oh, I like that one, I don't like number 3, oh, that one's crap," or whatever. And then we're going to go through them one at a time and see if we can identify the ingredients of an empathetic response. So here's what Michelle told me. I'll just step back and let you have a read. And then, oh, that was quick. And then we'll have a look at the responses. Are we all good? Okay. All right. Here are my suggested responses. So have a look at those and have even a chat to the person beside you and go, "Yeah, I like that one. No, I don't like that one." And then we're going to vote for them. I always know which one you're up to when you start laughing, I'm a mind reader. Okay, you've had some time to have a think. We'll go through them one at a time and we're going to do a little bit like Mel was doing on Facebook. We're going to vote. So you can just do thumbs up if you like or thumbs down for dislike, okay? Or you can yell out, I really don't care. Number 1, are we thumbs up because we think there's some empathy in there, or are we thumbs down? No, I wouldn't say that, don't like that. Thumbs up? Oh wow, we've got quite a few thumbs up and we've got some thumbs down, probably more thumbs down. Thumbs up people, anyone brave enough to sort of sing out and say why you were thumbs up? What do you like about number 1? Are you sort of thinking or saying, you're trying to show that, it's all right to cry about a pet? I did that too, trying to make her feel normal, that, she was sort of upset about a pet. Sometimes people say, well, if they're talking to someone who's been there and done that, they sort of feel like, oh, well, then I'm not going nuts, I'm not crazy. All of those things are very true, but I'm with the thumbs down people. There's actually, how sad begins with empathy, but this is what we do the moment we introduce our own story. Empathy ceases and my story begins. And it's my story of my loss. And it's almost like we've done this. Like we've said, okay, I've heard your stuff, Michelle. Oh, that was sad, but let's put that over there. I'm going to tell you about my dog and what happened to me and how I cried and what that was like. And this is what I often think. We do it with great compassion in our hearts. We really mean well. But there's no empathy in the statement, when my dog died, I cried for weeks. What it actually is changing the subject. We've gone away from the cat and we're now talking about my dog. Even if we meant well, it's not empathetic. So number 2, who likes number 2? I guess when they're 18, they're going to die, for goodness sake. Likers? No, we've got lots of thumbs down. Nobody ever in an audience likes number 2. But I've got news for you. When my dad died 5 years ago, you liked it then. My dad was 88 when he died. What do you reckon people said to us when your dad dies at 88? Spot on, had a good innings, had a good oh, you're lucky, 88, oh, 88's good, oh dear. And they tell you all this good stuff about how lucky you were that your dad died when he was 88. True story. I wanted to say to people, but I never did, because I thought they'd think I'd need counselling, and I write the books about it, and I thought, no, don't say this. But I wanted to say this. We were robbed. Dad only got to 88. But I knew I couldn't say it because I should be grateful that he got to 88. But I wasn't. I felt robbed and cheated. And this is why I felt robbed, because we always thought Dad would get to 90. Damn it. He was supposed to get to 90. Mum and Dad were married for 61 years. And this is a true story. Their anniversary was on the Monday. Dad died in April. The anniversary is just around the corner. He died in April. And the anniversary was on a Monday and he died on the Wednesday. I reckon he hung out for one more anniversary with Mum. And that was 61 years. And Mum reckons it wasn't enough. How many years did Mum want? Forever is the answer. So we think we were robbed, but in our society, we often use age in our words of condolence to kind of make it all right, to make it seem a bit better, to kind of, cheer us up, to try and say, you're lucky. And you know what else we do? I believe we do it at the other end of the spectrum. When someone has, a miscarriage, a stillborn babe, a babe that dies in utero, maybe 34 weeks gestation, 25, whatever, we often use age in our words of condolence. And we say things like this: it was nature's way. It's probably happened for a reason. You're young, you can have more children. It wasn't meant to be. At least you've got your other ones, or whatever. And we seem to have all of these statements that say, it's okay, it really isn't that bad. And in grief terms, we call that minimising a loss. Trying to say to the person, it's a minimal loss, don't get too upset, and look at all this other stuff waiting for you. It's going to be all right. And when we have a minimising statement, there is no empathy in that statement. Who likes number 3? What kind of cat do you end up getting? Who likes that one? No one ever likes that one either. What sort of person says that? What kind of cat did you end up getting? It shows they are listening, good listening. Bad responding, I call it. Good listening, bad responding. I'll tell you what kind of person says that. The sort of person that says, let's not talk about the one that died. Let's talk about something cheery. Let's change the subject. Let's not go there and say, we'll talk about the new cat instead. And people do that when a person dies as well. You know, I certainly know, you know, in the work I do, I did a lot of work in bereavement support groups sort of years ago, and parents would always talk about, you know, people who would change the subject and like, they just had a child that died, and then people would say, have you got any other kids? It's the same thing. Like, we're not talking about that one, but we'll talk about something else like that. Again, no empathy. It would have been worse if someone in the family died. Thumbs up or thumbs down? Thumbs down. Did you get the feeling Shoki was family? Absolutely. How about number 5? Shoki was the world to you. You must have loved her. Yep, thumbs up. People often instantly recognise that. And, you know, and I always ask them, because it's a little bit hard to hear, maybe I'll kind of preempt some of the things I'm hoping were in your head. These are some of my reasons for why that's a thumbs up that contains empathy. Number 1, it's got Shoki's name in it. Do you know when someone dies, we often don't say their name in front of the family because we think it'll upset them, remind them. We just won't go there till they say something first. And grieving people often really want to be able to talk about the person that's died and hear their name being spoken. The other reason why I like that is that it actually picks up the word love. Because I reckon that whole paragraph from Michelle really just had one objective. She wanted me to know I loved that cat like crazy. And that one picks that up. What else I like about it is this. Empathy should almost sound like the way you speak. I often say, and here's apologies to any counsellors that might be in the audience, I always say, it shouldn't sound like counsellors speak. It should just sound the way you talk to someone. It's casual language. It's kind of easy on the ear. And that one is. I think the other thing with empathy is this. When you make an empathetic response, you keep the conversation open. It allows her to say, oh, I loved her heaps, you got no idea. You know, that cat and I, we were inseparable. And it keeps the conversation going. But when you say something like, oh, I guess when they're 18, then they're going to die sooner or later, it kind of, you know, where does she go then? She kind of has to agree that, well, yeah, what was I so upset for? And the conversation ceases. So all of those things are required, you know, for an empathetic response. But most of all, this is what I often say, number 5 has picked up on the essence of what Michelle meant. And when I can respond to something you say, and I've picked up the essence, like you might have spoken to me for 5 minutes, but I've grabbed the main bit that you wanted me to understand. If I can reflect that back to you in the conversation, this is what you're going to say. You're going to, maybe not openly, but in your head you'll say, you know what? She gets it. She understands. And that's the only one that gets it, that shows, I understand. And that becomes your ingredient for an empathetic response. It has to show you get it and that you understand. Thumbs up for number 6. At least you went quickly. He's not suffering anymore. No one likes that ever. But again, we say that about people, don't we? And this is what I think. Grieving people know it's better not to linger forever. Grieving people don't want their loved ones in pain, in intensive care for weeks and weeks and weeks. But it's sort of like your head knows that it's better, you know, not to be suffering, but it's your heart that kind of misses them regardless. And I can tell you this about when my dad died. He had like a week. We come from Geelong. And he had a week in Geelong Hospital when he was dying. And so I flew down from Queensland, and I've got a brother and a sister, and they're in Melbourne. So they all, you know, came down to Geelong to be with Mum. And my brother and I, we slept the night in hospital for the last 3 nights before Dad died. And my sister took Mum home so that she could have sort of a sleep, and we'd bring her back early in the morning, and then she'd spend the day in hospital. And we were all there, you know, virtually 24/7. Those last 3 days, you know, we just watched and we watched, and I know we thought, geez, is it going to be today? Is it going to be soon? You know, it's just, some of you would have been there. It's kind of this waiting thing that you do. But on the morning that Dad died, he went quickly and he was not suffering. But you know what? I could have sat for another day or 2 or 3 or more. And it was kind of like it was too soon. And it was kind of like, is that it? I wanted another day with my dad. And so it didn't help in my head, or in my heart. In my head knew that this was all right, but my heart wanted more. And when we respond with empathy to someone, I think we respond to what's in their heart. Their head's often logical, and logic's good, but it's where your heart's where the hurt is and where the sentiment is. And we want people to recognise our hurt too. Last one, what a menu. Some people don't get to eat all that stuff, the ice cream, the smoked salmon, all that. No one ever likes that one either. But I tell you what, it shows you've been a good listener. And why I've used the word listening often is this. People often say to me, the most important thing I can do for someone who's grieving is to be a good listener. And I think, yep, that's important. But if you're a crap responder, your good listening's gone out the window. And number 7 is great listening, crap responding. So what we have to do is to become effective responders. And that's why I say some people will think, there's empathy and all of that stuff because, you're sort of talking to this person and so forth. But going back to my topic, is your empathy really empathetic? There's only one there that's actually empathetic. The other ones give you something to say when you don't know what else to say, but they're actually not empathetic. And so sometimes people say to me, well, what's the difference between empathy and sympathy? And I thought I'd talk a bit about that today because there's lots of sympathy that happens when, people have a loss. And I don't think that's a bad thing. But sympathy always sounds the same. And if any of you watch CSI on TV, the cop show, that thing, CSI, sympathy always sounds like this. I'm sorry for your loss. Doesn't matter who's died, doesn't matter what's happened, doesn't matter what the circumstances were, they're always sorry for your loss. But this is how they say it. The CSI team comes in, there's usually 2 or 3 of them, and they introduce themselves to, the immediate family, and the person who's died might still be in the house, or, the coroners have been, they've taken them away or whatever. And they do this, they come up to the family, they go, introduce yourself, whatever, detective you are, put their hand out, I'm sorry for your loss. And then without drawing breath, they say, and where were you between the hours of 10 and 12 p.m? That's how sorry they are. Because you see, sympathy doesn't require you to be engaged in the heart. Sympathy just kind of says something that your head can take in. And sympathy doesn't require you to even know a thing about the story or the relationship that the person shared. I could say to any of you, I'm sorry for your loss, and not know a thing about your loss. But empathy is quite different. And I always say this to people, I can never empathise with you until I've heard you tell me your story. Because I empathise with what's going on with you. Not the I'm sorry for your loss, and that could be anybody's loss. So empathy requires way more work on our part. So I say it's a bit like this. Empathy means I must listen to your story, but then I've got to hear, what matters most, that thing I call the essence of the story. I've got to show I understand. I have to accept the way you feel. Mightn't be the way I would respond, mightn't be what I've ever even thought of, but it's about you, it's about your story, it's about your loss. I need to show I'm on your wavelength. I need to suspend my judgment. And this is where I have to confess something to you. I hate cats. I don't like them one bit. But it doesn't matter. So when my neighbour's cat died and I said, tell me what happened, and she actually sat in my lounge room for about 3 hours and told me the story of Shoki and told me about, going to the vet and told me about the sickness and told me about the operation. And then the vet said, well, we could do more, but she'll never survive. And they had to make a decision. So, can I take Shoki home for one more day? And I put her on the bed and I fed her smoked salmon and ice cream and kangaroo meat and I took her to a sandbox. She told me all of that. She had no clue I hate cats. Because I have to suspend judgment, and guess what? It's not about me. It's about her story and her grief. And when I open my mouth, the flavour of my words have to show I get it. And I call this the test of empathy. if the person who's speaking hears my response, they would either start nodding their head going, yeah, that's what I mean. Or they'd actually say, you know, that's just what I wanted you to understand. Or, yeah, that's exactly how it is. Or just inside them, they'd go, she gets it. She understands. But more importantly, I could talk to her for hours. And I think that's not something we afford grieving people. We spend way more time avoiding them than talking to them. That's what empathy looks like, and it's hard work. I want to show you some pickies now. This is me. This is me, not last year, but the year before. I was diagnosed with breast cancer. Now, I didn't need to know more about grief, okay? Spent 30 years hanging out with grieving people. I didn't need to know more about loss. But the universe decided differently. So I got a dose of breast cancer, like out of the blue, you know, happy, healthy, you know, having a good life, and all of a sudden there it is. So I spent, you know, the best part of 12 months, not last year, before, having treatment, having chemo, radiation, you know, everything else they do to you. And so there I was, and I lost my hair. Here's a true story. Don't ever believe the literature they give you when you're first diagnosed with cancer. Guess what? I read all the stuff. You get stuff from the doctor, the oncologist, everywhere, and it comes in the mail and all this sort of stuff. So I got all this literature, and I was diagnosed just before Christmas. So I had just a little Christmas break to read all this stuff, and then I was starting chemo straight after. I had an operation before Christmas and starting chemo straight after Christmas. So I had, you know, a couple of weeks, I guess, to read up all this stuff, and so I read this stuff, and guess what the books say? Only some people will lose their hair when they have chemo. Now, if you haven't worked this out already, my glass is always half full. And I'm thinking, oh, thank God it's only some, because I'm going to be those some. So anyway, I go and meet this oncologist man on the Gold Coast, and, you know, they take you through this great big kind of consultation. They tell you what they're going to do and when they're going to do it and how often they're going to do it and what's going to happen and how you're going to feel and, you know, the sickness and this and all this kind of stuff. And so, lovely man. And then he says, do you have any questions? And of course I did. I had two. Can I still drink Sauv Blanc? And you know what his answer was? Depends how much. Good answer. But true, this was my most important question was, I said, I've read in the books I got, I said that only some people lose their hair when they have chemo. I said, what percentage of your patients, like, I don't want to know what's in the books, I want to know what's real. So what percentage of your patients actually lose their hair? And he looked at me like, does this woman know nothing? And he started to shake his head like this, and he said, Doris, he said, I can't guarantee you anything about this outcome for you, how the chemo will work, you know, whether the cancer will go away, what the next 5 years will be like. So I can't guarantee you anything. He said, we'll do our best, but there are no guarantees. But he said, I can guarantee you 100% you will lose all of your hair. Well, that's not what the book said. The book said only some people. And I said to him, how do I get to be in the lot that are the some? And he said, it's got nothing to do with you, what you eat, what you do. And he said, it's what's in the drugs we're giving you. And your drugs are going to take out all of your hair. Now, this is a true story. And some people find this a bit hard to believe. I was okay about the cancer. I thought, well, if I've got it, I've got it. They'll cut it out. They'll get rid of it. And they'll then do whatever they have to do. But you know what? I was not okay about losing my hair. For me, that was a greater loss than the cancer. Believe it or not. And I didn't know I'd react like that, but that's how I reacted. I hated being bald. I hated losing my hair. I hated the fact that it interfered with my, you know, travel around Australia talking about grief. You can't hang around Australia travelling around, you know, talking about grief when you're having chemo every 3 weeks, when you're having radiation 33 days in a row, you can't do anything, and all of this stuff. And you can't also, men, you can't be a bald woman in the Qantas Club because you're the only one. You can't be a bald woman shopping at David Jones because people stare at you. You cannot be a bald woman and go to a cafe and sit beside a table of people enjoying their cappuccino because you put them off their food. And this is what I found. I found baldness was like a disability. And so I covered my head up for some time, but then I got over it. And then I went out as a bald woman. And I thought, no, I'm going to stand up for bald women of Australia. And so I just went out like this with oh, I can do the pointy thing, with no hair, but it frightened people. But I didn't care in the end. But this is my little granddaughter, Lucy. She was about 2 there. And one day she came down to the Gold Coast. They live in Toowoomba, which is a few hours away. Came to visit for the weekend. And so they always saw me like this. And little Lucy went back with the family up to Toowoomba, and her granddad said, has Grandma got any hair yet? And little Lucy goes, oh no, Pa, she's only got a head. You gotta love it, don't you? You gotta love it. So there I was with only a head. And for those of you who think, oh my goodness, what a groovy grandma she is, she's getting a tat on her skull. Someone asked me that one day, do you get a tat on your head? No, I didn't do anything that exciting. I never thought of it, actually. That's my hairdresser. The day I got my head shaved with all the remnants of my hair that had been falling off for a few weeks. That was one of the toughest days to the whole period, making the decision to go. And in fact, I couldn't even make the decision. My sister came up from Melbourne to stay with me for a few days and got such a shock when she saw what I looked like. And she said, hey, time to get that hair off. You know, I'll make the appointment, I'll come with you, and that's what we did. But why I tell this story is, one, it's a true story, but it's really important to say this about empathy and loss and grief. We often think that grief and death go together, but grief goes with loss. And I reckon all of us know far more people in our own lives who are experiencing a loss that isn't death. And sometimes we forget to be empathetic about the everyday losses in people's lives, because we often think, oh, that's not so bad, that's not so big, or they'll be all right with that, or they'll cope, or she's brave, or she's tough, or she's strong. I was all of those things, but I still hated losing my hair. And then it got to this point, and I want to just show you another pic. This is what I looked like. So chemo didn't just take away my hair, it took away my appearance. I don't care if you say, God, you look ugly, because I looked in the mirror every day and that's what I saw. I said to my mum, I visited mum in between treatments one time down in Geelong, and this is what my mum said to me. She said, you look nothing like my daughter. And I thought to myself, I said to her, I said, Mum, I look in the mirror every day and I think, who is that person looking back at me? Who is that person? I just knew it wasn't me. I didn't look like me. I didn't feel like me. And that's part of the loss, losing your physical appearance, losing your energy, kind of losing who you were. But, you know, people don't get it. And I wanted, this top picture was the week before chemo. And that picture down the bottom was in the midst of my chemo. So what a difference, you know, it makes a matter of a few months. Now, that was my life. That's how I had to live. Now I want to share with you some of the responses from people around me, people I worked with, my friends, my neighbours, some of their responses, and I want you to pick the empathetic ones, okay? Which one's got the most empathy in it? Are you kind of going, none? That's what I thought too. Do you know, I prayed my hair would not come back curly. I didn't want curly hair. I felt like saying to the wig lovers, if you think wigs are so fabulous, why don't you put one on your head all through summer in Queensland? Don't you love you've got the right head for baldness? Well, gee, that made me feel really good. I couldn't believe that one. And to tell you the truth, I didn't have a good head for baldness, because this is what we all found out and the whole world saw it. I have a massive lump on my head. It's right here, huge, and it's in my skull. And when I was bald, the whole world got to see it. I've hidden it all my life, and you could hide it no longer. So it was, yeah, the lady there's got one too. She's pointing to her head, yeah, okay, we can talk afterwards at morning tea. Exactly. Can I tell you which one I hated almost most of all? You have to stay positive. It became a cliche. Every man and his dog said to me, you have to stay positive, you have to stay. I was the most positive person in the world. I went to work every day through my cancer. People said, what are you doing here? And you know what I thought? I'd rather hang out with the healthy people. I wanted to be with the well people. I wanted to be where there was, I don't know, another human being. I didn't want to lie in bed and be sick. I'd rather go to work and be sick. And I was as positive as I could be. But this is what you have to be. You have to be realistic. So when you have a loss and a grief, whether it's someone who dies or whether it's losing your hair or losing your job or whatever it might be, I think we need to encourage people to be realistic. So if they want to say today is not a good day, let them say it. If they want to say I cried all of last night, let them cry. If they want to say why me, this isn't fair, let them say that. If they want to say where's God in all of this, let them have their say. They don't have to be positive to make you feel better. Because I think that's half the reason why we say it. And just because, by the way, you say to someone, you have to stay positive, and they go, yeah, I know, it doesn't mean they feel any differently inside. All they're doing is agreeing with you, because what else can they say to a dumb statement like that? So, what are we going to do? I think this is often why we say the things we say. We think we've got to fix people when they're grieving. We've got to cheer them up, make it better, take their mind off, stop them from crying, help them move on, whatever it might be. I think we have to be the doer of something to them and their grief. And you know what I think you have to be? You have to actually be the person who is just there sometimes. Sometimes it's better to say nothing. Sometimes it's better just to put your arm around them. Sometimes it's better to zip your lip and say absolutely nothing. And so I think sometimes if we're prone to wanting to do something, often what we end up doing is saying something. And I go back to my title of what I'm talking about. You'd better make sure if whatever you say is actually empathetic. And now I'm going to give you my big tip. This is how we create empathy in our communication. This is a little diagram that I use to teach this to people. And I normally do it on like butcher's paper on a flip chart thing, but I'm going to do it up here, which is not as much fun, but anyway, I'll give it a go. This diagram shows how we go from having a fair bit of distance in a relationship. Maybe, you know, we don't know the person that well, or we're total strangers. How do we get to a point where we're really close, like up the top there? How do we get to that point where we would feel comfortable having a really close conversation about something? This is how we go. When we're down here and we're strangers or we don't know each other well, whether you know it or not, we do what we call cliche communication. Cliche actually means automatic, don't have to think about it, just pops out like that. And, you know, I know when we first meet someone, we might just smile at them. You know, we just smile, we just do it. We don't think, what do I do? We just smile, and a smile says hello, hi. We might put our hand out. We might say, how do you do? Do you know that nobody ever, if you do that and say, how do you do, nobody ever says, how do you do what? They don't, because it's a cliche, it's automatic. They know the answer. How do people go, I'm fine, thank you. And what about you? We know the answer. Here's another cliche. Hi, how are you? Nobody ever says, oh, God, I got this migraine, it'd kill a horse, you know, and I've had it for weeks and weeks and weeks, you know, and I think there's something wrong there, but, you know, I've had tests, and I've had an MRI, and they can't find anything. They don't say that because it's a cliche. They know, hi, how are you means I'm fine, thanks, even if you're crap. You've got to say, I'm fine, thanks. We call all of that cliche communication because it's automatic. There's one topic, even with a total stranger, that we automatically talk about, that it's kind of a connector, and we all do it, and we don't have any problem doing it, and it just pops out of our mouths. You know what that topic is? Beautiful, the weather. We talk about it like it's, you know, the most important thing in the world, but it's a connector, and we all do it. So anyway, down there is cliches. I wonder if this is going to work. Yippee. The next level, if we want to get a bit closer, what we do in our society is what we call small talk. And you've all done small talk. I did it last night at dinner. Hi, how are you? What brings you here? You know, which club are you in? And did you live around here? Did you take a plane? Did you? And that's all small talk. Got family? You know, is that your wife? How do you do? All of that small talk. I don't know if you know this, but small talk is based on facts. Small talk makes you seem really clever because you know all the answers. So anything I ask you in small talk, you will know the answer to, because small talk is always based on facts about you. Small talk is never like this. Small talk never says, so what do you think of the district governor? Never going to happen. That's not small talk. That's opinions, and we reserve that when we kind of know people much better, because to share opinions we need an element of trust. We need an element of, I kind of know this person. You're not just going to blab something to someone if you don't know where it's going to go. So opinions we reserve for when we feel like we're a bit closer in that communication. But do you know what topic is the last one that I would be prepared to talk to you about if I felt that you and I were really connected closely? What would we be willing to talk about with each other? Do you know what it is? Good on you. It's feelings. Yeah, it's feelings. But I've kind of drawn a line. It's not there to underline it. The feelings is there to say many of us in our society draw a line at that conversation. Like, I'll talk about the weather to anyone. I'll say, hi, how are you? I'll introduce myself. I'll small talk. I'll ask you what you think about the elections happening in, where were they, in Sydney this weekend? What do you think the outcome's going to be? I ask you about your Rotary Club, and happy to get opinions about that, but I draw the line at feelings. And I have lots of reasons. Too personal, don't want to go there, don't know you well enough, I don't want to upset you. I'll wait till you raise the subject first and then I'll talk about it. I'm not going to ask you though. And often there's this line that's drawn. We don't know the line's there, but it's often drawn. We may have grown up in a family where we didn't much talk about feelings. I've grown up in a beautiful family, lovely family, but feelings was not kind of on the agenda most of the time. We were a very resilient family where the kind of unspoken rule was, you don't cry over spilt milk here. You get on with it, you're brave, you're tough, you're strong. And that stuff is all very good, except for when you need it. And you need it when, or you don't need it, when you need to talk about feelings. But this is what happens. If you're not good with your own feelings, you know, if you're not kind of good at sharing them, or you always keep them to yourself, or you're embarrassed about crying in front of people or whatever, this is what often happens. You might not be so good at talking to other people about theirs either. And so what happens is that feelings conversations don't happen. And that's where the empathetic conversations happen. This is an example I often use because I work in the funeral business. You know, someone might have death, and we'll say there's a widow, you know, her husband dies. Let's say 100 to 150 people turn up at the funeral. You know, that's a big number. 1 week, and there's feelings at funerals, and they're happy to give their, you know, words of condolence, and they might have a tear together or something like that, and so feelings are happening. 1 week after the funeral, how many people out of those 100 to 150 do you reckon are going to call her to check in to see how she's doing? Are you thinking a handful? Probably. 1 month after the funeral, how many of those 100 people are going to check in and say, just thought I'd give you a call, Sue, to see how you're doing? 1 month. Probably 0, 1 or 2. What if let's say it happens now, and we know her husband's died, and let's say his birthday's in August. How many of those 100 people in the week of his birthday are going to ring her and say, hi Sue, Doris here, just I'd give you a bell. I know it's Jack's birthday this week and I guess it's going to be a pretty lonely time for you without him. How many of those 100 are going to make that phone call? Probably 0. I know, Mel, what they're going to do. They're going to Facebook it. Because Facebooking it is a whole lot easier than fronting a person. This is what I say. When you're up there and you're the grieving person up there and you've got someone beside you who doesn't know if they should talk about it or not, this is what I know. That up there is no queue at the front door of the grieving person's home. It is around the time of the death, but it diminishes within days. It diminishes. And so the person up there who's grieving at the top is often left on their own, and people will say, but she's got a big family, she's got a big circle of friends. Oh, she's in Rotary. Loads of people around. Yeah, they will. for a time. And this is the other thing. It's the conversations that cease. Might not be the help. People might still come and mow the lawns or help. But it's the conversations around how are you doing that cease. Because we often don't know what to say and we're afraid of putting our foot in it. So up there, the conversations sound like this. Up there, we say things like, and I often say, my tip for today is, if you're listening to someone who's grieving, and you want to respond with empathy, begin your response with, it sounds like. And then you've got to tell them what it sounds like. So just like with Shoki, the cat, and we say to Michelle, Michelle, it sounds like you loved that cat like crazy. Michelle, it sounds like Shoki was your bestest friend in the universe. Michelle, it sounds like you're heartbroken without Shoki. It sounds like, it sounds like, it sounds like. But I don't want you all going back doing it sounds like, because then they'll know that you've been to one of my seminars. What we're going to do, just to finish up, we've got about 5 minutes to go. This is a real lady. She's actually a lady from Adelaide. She wrote a poem. She wrote a whole book of poetry. And she wrote this poem in particular after her husband died. He's dying of cancer. She put a book together of her poetry. I want you to imagine she's your friend, that Valerie's your friend, and she tells you this about one day going out for coffee on her own. So have a quick read and then we're going to empathise and then we'll finish. Got it? I'm just going to go back to that slide. I'm going to demonstrate cliches, facts, opinions, feelings. Let's say Valerie's my friend, and she's told me that about that day, having a coffee and starting to cry, car keys, whatever. Cliche. Valerie, you're strong. You know, you'll get used to those times on your own. Cliche. Valerie, Jim wouldn't want you getting upset. He would want you to move on and move forward. Valerie, it was God's will to take him in the end, and at least he's not suffering anymore. All of that is cliche-based. Fact, Valerie, you've got your children, those 3 beautiful girls and the little grandchildren. You know, I'm sure when they come around, they bring you so much joy. You have to focus on the joy now and the happy memories. Opinion. You know what, Valerie? I know it might be early days, but I could sign you up for RSVP. And soon you'll meet a nice gentleman. Valerie, you're only 52. Come on. Or we could make a feeling statement, and I'll go back to Valerie, so we've got that. We could say, and I'll use my model, it sounds like. Valerie, it sounds like you miss Jack every single day. Valerie, it sounds like the 2 of you were like 2 peas in a pod. You didn't even have to talk, you always just knew what you wanted together. But I haven't yet got to the essence, because I actually look for the essence in someone's story. And I don't know what you think the essence is, but I know what the essence is. Valerie wanted us to know that when you're widowed, you don't just miss the good stuff, the coffees together. You even miss the stuff that drove you nuts. You even miss the stuff that annoyed you. You even miss the things you used to fight about. And Valerie wrote that poem to say, you know, when you're a widow, you miss the lovely coffees. You miss those beautiful moments of just knowing what each other was thinking. But you even miss the damned car keys that took him forever to take out of his pocket and get that central locking off. And so I'd say this, Valerie, it sounds like you even miss the stuff that drove you crazy. Or I might say, Valerie, it sounds like you'd have him back, warts and all. Valerie, it sounds like you love Jim so much, you want him back with all his imperfections. Or Valerie, I bet every day you're tripped up by something that reminds you that Jack's not here. But this is what we do with empathy. We talk about the story at hand and we forget the cliches, the facts and the opinions. Let somebody else use those. And I call it staying above that line, having a feelings conversation. Anything else is below the line and it's not empathetic. And I guarantee you this, as you go away today, next time you're talking to someone who's had a loss or grief or whatever, or you're listening into conversations, you'll say, oh, that was a below the line. Oh, that was crap. Oh, that was a cliche. Oh, you'd never say that. Got to be above the line. And you're going to think, what did she say? And she said, it sounds like, and then you fill it in with what you think the essence of the story is. But so that the whole of Adelaide, doesn't go away, I just want to go there. The whole of Adelaide doesn't go away saying that. There are lots of other ways that we can, say something that's above the line. Just say something that they said to you. Coffee's not the same anymore, is it? That's empathetic. Those wretched car keys, you miss them like crazy, don't you? That's empathetic. They are above the line. If you can do that, I'll tell you something. You're going to be like that. I said there's no queue at the front door for grieving people. You'll be someone who's in that queue because, God, it gets lonely once the funeral's over, and there's very few people around who often want to check in with your feelings. But when they do, and this is an author from America who wrote about this when her mum and her dad died. Her mum died when she was at school and her dad died while she was in her early 20s and she was orphaned. And in her book she said, if you find someone that speaks your language, you could talk to them for hours. I'd love you to be someone who a grieving person could say, I could have talked to her for hours. She understood. She got it. Thank you.